And I think we should get started. It's 4:05, so people will join us, but want to thank everyone who's here thus far, and we are going to get started. So, turning 5, kindergarten admissions process. I want to make sure that everyone here is, my apologies, is at the right place. So today we will be talking about the kindergarten admissions process, which should be all parents who have a child born in 2018 qualifies for kindergarten admissions for the September 2023 school year. And so we will be talking about the kindergarten admissions today, and specifically about New York City. So luckily everyone that we pulled seemed to be in New York City, so you guys are all in the right place. And I just want to give a little overview about the presentation that we will be giving today. And so first we will start with introductions. Again, my name is Diana Imbert. I am a staff attorney here at Advocates for Children, and the other person who is on the screen who will be jumping in and out for answering questions and then taking over the second half of this presentation. Her name is Betty Baez Mello. She is, here she is. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. As Diana said, my name is Betty Baez Mello. I'm the director of our Early Childhood Education Project here at AFC. Just for those who weren't here when we started, please, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, put them in the Q&A or the chat. I'll be responding to questions as Diana is presenting, and then during some designated breaks in the presentation.
Thank you, Betty. All right, and then we'll start off with talking about researching schools, talk a little bit about the admissions priorities, talk a little bit about the application, some tips, charter schools, and then students with disabilities, and then finally resources and contacts. And like I mentioned, the things that you will be seeing in this presentation, most of them will be hyperlinked so that you can click on them and easily access them once you get the presentation, once we are done with this. All right, so let's get started. So first and foremost, what is Advocates for Children? Advocates for Children is an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. We were founded in 1971 by a group of parents with students who had disabilities. Since then, we have actually expanded our mission to really all New Yorkers who face barriers to academic success, in particular with a focus on low-income New Yorkers. And some of the things that we offer is we have a helpline. This is the number for the helpline, 1-866-427-6033. So of course, we will try to answer as many questions as we can today, but you can call our helpline with any other questions you may have. We are available to answer your phone calls from Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., although you can always leave a voicemail. We offer free legal services to low-income families. We have guides and resources that can be found on our website. There's workshops and trainings like the ones that we are doing right now. And then lastly, we do policy, advocacy, and impact litigation to really kind of expand the reach that we have across educational kind of movements and things that are happening. Okay, so we're going to be talking today about the transition to kindergarten, which means that all children born in 2018 have the right to a public school kindergarten seat in September 2023. There are two processes for families of children with disabilities. So the first is the kindergarten IEP, or the Turning 5 process. We have a separate webinar that covers this in its entirety, and this is specific to children for families of students with disabilities. And again, we will let you know of when those dates might be, but it is a separate webinar where we really cover that in much detail. And then there is the kindergarten admissions process, which is the process of applying to Department of Education schools. This is the exact webinar that we will be covering today and in great detail. And the kindergarten admissions process both applies to students with disabilities and students without disabilities, because all New York City public schools serve both population of students. Most of the families who get into kindergarten and have a kindergarten seat will do it through the kindergarten admissions process. And so that's the process that we're talking about today. But like I mentioned, we do have a separate webinar on the kindergarten IEP process. So if you have more questions that are specific to that, really tune in and look for the dates for those kindergarten IEPs, because we will cover that in much more detail. Today, we will focus on the kindergarten admissions process. So I just got started, but wanted to see if there were any questions that may have come up. Betty may come on if there are any questions, and if not, I will move on. Okay, so it might be too early for questions. Oh, no,
There have been a couple of questions related to the video. We will be sending you a link to the video that'll be posted on our YouTube page. And just with respect to eligibility for legal services, families who are interested should contact our helpline. They screen families to determine the concern, the level of need for legal representation, as well as eligibility. And they are the ones who could help put you in contact with one of our attorneys. Generally, it is about 200% of the poverty guideline.
Thank you, Betty. And just so you know, there will be kind of periods of times, although Betty is currently answering questions in the Q&A as well, so please put your questions there, but we will also stop temporarily to answer questions, especially questions that Betty thinks might be helpful to everyone. And so just know that there will be periods of times where we will stop to ask questions. Okay, so before we get started, wanted to run another poll. So during the Department of Education's kindergarten admissions process, you can apply to A, DOE non-specialized schools, B, charter schools, C, private schools, or D, all of the above. Okay, I'm waiting for just a few more responses. All right, we're getting a mixed response here. Just going to give a few more seconds to see if anyone else wants to participate in the poll. Okay. So many of us had various answers, but the answer is actually A, DOE non-specialized schools. We will talk a little bit about charter schools later on in the presentation. And unfortunately, private schools will not be covered during this admissions process. But yes, the answer is A. Okay. So the process overview. The process is for District 1 through 32 non-specialized schools. First, we will ask and talk a little bit about all of these processes, but the first recommendation is that you research schools. And then from there, you actually will apply this winter. After that, you will receive offers in the spring, then you will accept offers in the spring, and then you will hear from waitlist. And we'll talk a little bit more about what each of these processes means in the upcoming slides, but just wanted you to see the overview of where we were going. Okay. So in the terms of researching schools, the first is that we really recommend that you find your zone school. Most students will be attending their zone school. And so we highly recommend that you sort of know what your zone school is and what district you are in. And the way that we recommend doing that, there are 3 ways. One is to go through schools.newyorkcity.gov and find a school. The second is through myschools.newyorkcity. We'll talk a little bit more about myschools.newyorkcity. Highly recommend making an account for this process so that you have access and can really kind of star your schools and know which schools you will be looking through and really interested in and kind of be able to investigate that. Again, we will talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And then lastly, you can call 311 and ask for them to give you your zone school based on your address. Second, we ask then that you begin to research those school options. One of the things that you can do is that you can contact each school regarding open houses and virtual tours. Some schools may even let you do in-person tours, but since the pandemic, that has changed. So we do ask that you call the schools and find out what their policy might be regarding tours. And then again, My Schools. So if you haven't heard about My Schools, we highly recommend that when you get this presentation that you click on this link, create an account, and really start researching the schools because there's a lot of useful information that can be found on myschools.newyorkcity. And again, we will show you some examples of My Schools and the way that it works in just a few slides. And then there's Inside Schools, which is actually owned not by the Department of Education, but by a private provider. And what Inside Schools is really good for is that it allows parents to actually review schools in the similar way that you would review a restaurant. So you can really kind of get to see feedback on how parents were experiencing and whether or not a parent recommends or what they think about a school. And then we also want you to understand what the admissions priority is. We will talk a little bit about that in the presentation today. But if you do have more questions or really want to dive deeper into this, there are sort of two options. One of them is a 2023 New York City Public School Admissions Guide. Again, this is hyperlinked, so you can click on this and it will pull you right to that. And then there's schools.newyorkcity.gov/kindergarten that will go ahead and explain the admissions priorities that we will talk a little bit about at this presentation today. So this is what we recommend. Obviously, this is a big choice, and so we really want parents to make an informed decision as they are making and choosing the schools that they want to apply to. All of these are helpful resources in the process of really applying for kindergarten. Okay, so this is just an example of what this admissions guide looks like. As you can see, there is a specific section that has to do with kindergarten. It's listed right here. And so as you can see, it has like a who can apply, explore elementary schools, talks about how to get children offers, how to apply to kindergarten, how to get your offer, and then gifted and talented. We will talk a lot about these things today, but it's always really helpful to have a guide to turn to. And so this is the guide and what it looks like. And again, it is also hyperlinked here, so you can access it at any point. And then this is an example of my schools that I referenced earlier. So this is sort of, to the left-hand corner, you can see how to get started. It's a pretty simple and friendly website for parents to use. What's really cool about it is that you can actually type in your address and then see all of the schools around you. And there are some key things that you can actually learn about the school, right? Whether it's in what district it's in, whether it's within your zone school or not, whether it is a barrier and free and accessible schools, how far it is from your home, and then what grades it actually serves. So all of that is listed here. Another example, for example, is, clearly listed here. So this is Chelsea Prep. We sort of put our address of where we work and then found some schools nearby us. And so you see all of this information that can be found, right? That has the school's phone number, it has the school's email address, it has buses and trains that go there. It says how many students there are. It says how well the school is performing, whether or not it is an accessible school. So if you have a child who is wheelchair bound, for example, and needs an accessible school, it will have that listed as well. And then any other features. So for example, like late pickup will be listed in the school as well. And like I mentioned, all schools are really there. And so it's a really helpful tool to really be able to search all of the schools that exist and then really get to compare and contrast to allow you to make a really informed decision about school choice. Okay, so another poll. Children are most likely to receive a kindergarten offer to A, the school they attended for pre-K, B, the school their siblings attended, C, their zone school, or D, their top choice. All right. Just gonna give a few more seconds to see if anyone else wants to respond. Okay. So yes, the vast majority of us did get it correct. It is indeed their zone school. We will talk a little bit again about admissions priority in just a second, but most students will attend their zone school, which is usually the school closest to the child's address, and definitely within a certain parameter of where their address is located. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these kindergarten admissions priorities. So as you can see here, there are lots of students who will be applying to kindergarten. And so there is an admissions priority that kind of happens as schools are considering which students they can allow into the schools. And so students are given priorities that then ultimately decide and help them get into the schools depending on whether or not they fit into that admissions category. So first admissions category is the first and the second are for children that live in the school zone. The first is for the children that live in a school zone and have a sibling that attends that school. So if you are a child that is applying to kindergarten and you are applying to your zone school and your sister goes to that school, you have a very, very, very high chance of getting into that school because you aren't in admissions priority number 1, meaning that there are no other students other than the students who are in the same admissions category as you, above you. The second admissions category is for a child that lives in that a child who lives within the school zone, but does not have a sibling that attends that school. So that is the second admissions priority. So obviously, if a child has a sibling that goes to the school, that child and is in the zone school, that child will go before a child who doesn't have a sibling, but that child who does have a sibling is second in line in terms of admissions priorities. Then the next 3 and 4 is for siblings who will also be attending the school. So for 3, it is for admissions priority number 3 is for a student who has a sibling who will be attending the school. And they are not, although they are not in the zone, they are within the school's district. Category 4 is for a child who has a sibling who will be attending the school, but is not within the district. Category 5 and 6 are for children who currently attend the school's pre-K program. So category 5 is for a child who currently attends the school's pre-K program, and they're within the school district as well. Category 6 is for a child who currently attends the school's pre-K program, but is not within the school's district. Number 7 is then for all other students in the district. Sorry, 7 is for the other students within that district. And then category 8, the very last category, are for other students that exist outside of that school district. And so again, these categories basically will tell you the likelihood of admissions into that school, depending on whether or not you are a child that lives in that school zone, that has a sibling that goes to the school as well, again, highest priority, versus if you're in category 8, which is a student who is outside the district completely, that child has the least likely chance to get into the school because every student who was in category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 will go before any student who is outside the district. So that is how the kindergarten admission priorities work. And then last but not least, which is that students who need an accessible school will receive an offer before other students in their priority group. So what that means is not that a child will jump priority groups, but that if we are working within, let's say, children who all live in the school zone, so they're but they don't have a sibling at the school, they're in category 2. If there are students who need an accessible school within that same category, they will go before the students who do not need an accessible school, but they will not go above category 1. They will stay within category 2, but will get offers before those in that same category get offers. Okay, so I know this was a lot. So let's try to actually give and work this out in an example to see if we understand, and if not, there will be room for questions. So kindergarten admissions priorities. PS 123 has 20 kindergarten seats. These students applied. So there were 5 zone students, 10 in-district students with the sibling at the school, 9 other in-district students, and then 1 non-district student who attends pre-K at PS 123. All right, so now that we've seen those categories, the question is, who are the first students who will receive an offer to PS 123? A, the zone students, B, the students who live in the district, C, the students currently attending pre-K at PS 123, or D, students who apply first. Just gonna give a few more seconds for anyone who wants to participate. All right, so yes, the vast majority of us got this correct, which is that the first students who will receive an offer will indeed be the zone students. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, so here we go. Like, you guys were correct. If PS 123 has 20 kindergarten seats, and right now we have 15, we have 25 students, right? So too many students for the 20 seats that we have. And so that means that students will get left behind. Okay, so here we go. The first students who get an offer, like everyone said earlier, are indeed the 5 zoned students. Those students will get an offer to PS 123 because they are in the first category. And then next, we have the 10 in-district students with the sibling at the school. Then next in those admissions categories is the 1 non-district student who attends pre-K at PS 123. Now, as we can see, we have filled up most of the spots and we only have 1, 2, 3, 4 spots remaining, but we have 9 other in-district students who have yet to receive an offer. And so what happens in this case is that the students actually have a number assigned to them and a lottery happens to choose which students will get those seats. Because again, all of those students are in the exact same admissions priority group. And so there's no real way to know which students get chosen or for those that don't get chosen. And so instead there's a lottery system. It's just kind of by random. And so then those last 4 students will fill up the seats and these other students will get waitlisted to that school. Okay, just giving everyone a second to just see. Like I said, I know this is really complicated, but we are hoping that this example helped to give some reference to you guys. Okay. All right, and there are some exceptions to the schools. So there's non-zone school districts, meaning that these schools don't actually have zones. Instead, they have different admissions priorities. So District 1 in the Lower East Side, Manhattan, District 7 in the South Bronx, and District 23, Bronxville, Brooklyn, actually have different admissions criteria that they use. So for example, District 1 in the Lower East Side looks for people of color and low-income students, and they give priority to those students versus giving priority specifically in the ways in the admissions categories that we talked about earlier. So again, these 3 schools, school districts don't actually have zone schools and instead follow other admissions priorities to those schools. So some of the non-zone school admission priorities is like whether or not there's a sibling in the school, whether there's a pre-K student in the school, whether they live in the school district or live outside of the school district. And then again, the best place to go really to reference the specifics of these exceptions is for you to actually go to myschools.newyork.city and to really check out each school's admissions priorities, because you do want to have a deep understanding of this as you are applying, because it will impact your child's chances of getting into the school that you ultimately want them to get into. Okay, and I know that we just covered a lot, so I will see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Anna. So I've answered some questions already in the Q&A, and you can see the typed responses. There is one that I think is easier to explain to all of you and may impact all of or many of you. It's whether all schools have a special class or have special classes. And so just as a reminder, the DOE kindergarten admissions process, the currently underway, is for DOE non-specialized schools, also sometimes called zone schools, neighborhood schools, or the public schools in the community. According to the DOE, all of these schools offer the same special education programs and services, and that's why families of children with disabilities can apply and should apply. But it's also means that the child's IEP or whether they have a disability is not a factor in applying to schools or in getting an admissions offer. According to the DOE, all of these non-specialized schools offer general education with supports and services, including related services like speech, OT, PT, counseling. They have SETs or special education teacher support services. This is a special education teacher who can work one-on-one with a child or a group of children for part of the day. All of these non-specialized schools should also be able to offer an ICT program. That's an integrated co-teaching program for children with and without disabilities to learn alongside each other with 2 teachers, including a special education teacher, and should all have a 12-to-1-to-1 special class, which is a special education classroom with a full-time special education teacher for all students with disabilities. So if in applying to these schools, you can count on them having that, or that's the assumption is that all the schools will have those services. Unfortunately, sometimes in practice, that's not the case. We do have, as Diana mentioned at the beginning, another webinar that's focused on developing the child's IEP. And in that presentation, do talk a little bit about what happens when the school that makes you an admissions offer or the school that the DOE assigns to your child cannot implement their IEP. So for families here who are families of children with disabilities, do recommend that you also attend that webinar. But hopefully this has answered that initial question. And if not, you can also contact our helpline, review our Turning 5 guide, and we'll also be sending you our admissions guide after this presentation. Okay, and then I'll take it from here. Okay. So we've just talked about the kindergarten application process and all that goes into researching schools and understanding priorities. The key thing to do is to submit that application, right, to apply. The application opened yesterday. It's open from December 7th, 2022 through January 20th, 2023. So you have a little bit over a month still left to apply. There are 3 primary ways to apply. One is online at myschools.nyc. You've heard us talk a lot about that website. Not only does it function as a school directory and provides information about each school, you can also apply to schools through My School, through this website. That's the DOE's preferred method for you to apply. If you do apply online, you'll be receiving notifications by email later in the spring when those offers are being made. So it may be helpful for you to create an account and be able to process the application that way. If not, you can also apply by calling the DOE, their Office of Student Enrollment at 718-935-2009. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Or you can visit a family welcome center, especially if you are hoping to complete the application in person on paper. You should contact a family welcome center first. This is a hyperlink with their contact information. They're all over the city and serve specific districts. They can support you with the application, including helping you submit the application, but do recommend that you make an appointment beforehand, just because there are still some scheduling limitations affected by the pandemic. You can and should apply in your preferred language. My Schools can be translated to about 9 other languages using on the top upper right of the website. The DOE has interpreters available by phone, as well as interpreters available and staff that speak languages other than English at the family welcome centers. Now, many families are regularly interested in the Gifted and Talented program. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Gifted and Talented offers an accelerated program for students who have advanced skills or abilities. In order to apply, you can list the programs in your kindergarten application. So in the kindergarten application, you can apply to up to 12 programs. That doesn't necessarily mean 12 schools, although it can. But for example, certain schools will have a Gifted and Talented program. They may have a bilingual program. If you're interested in those particular programs for any specific school, you should list the program code for those specifically, right? So you would include the Gifted and Talented program code in your application. If you're also interested in that school's bilingual program, you would list the bilingual program code in your application. And if it's a school that you like generally and want to be considered, you can also include that general school code in your application. So in some way or another, you're taking up 3 slots for that school. The Gifted and Talented programs are listed on My Schools. You can actually filter My Schools specifically for that function, and you'll receive a list of schools in your area that have that program. Eligibility, so all families can include Gifted and Talented, including families of children with disabilities, families who speak a language other than English, students who are English language learners are all eligible to apply. All families who list the Gifted and Talented program in their application, their child will be screened for eligibility. For preschool students who attend DOE pre-K programs, that could be in a district school, it can be in a community-based organization or a NICE. They could be in a pre-K center as well. that child's preschool teacher will evaluate the child and submit it to the DOE. For other families, including families of children who either are not in preschool or who attend a private school or religious preschool, DOE staff from the Office of Early Childhood Education, I believe, will contact families to schedule an interview in order to determine eligibility. That all happens after the kindergarten application process. And then subsequently, based on their eligibility, the DOE will make offers to families based on different admissions priorities, including, for example, whether the child has a sibling who attends the school, whether the child lives within that school's district. So this is generally the process for gifted and talented. It is new this year. The process had involved testing in prior years, but that has been eliminated. And so I think some of this will still be worked out during this year. So there may be a few hiccups, but you can find more information. It's at this gifted and talented hyperlink. And sorry that it doesn't appear in blue. So some tips for ranking schools, because again, you have 12 possible slots or for ranking programs. Consider your admissions priorities. You may want to have a balance of schools where you think your child has a strong chance of being admitted, as well as though the schools where that you prefer, right? You should rank the school that is your preference as number one. If there's a clear program for you that you based either on location, on train lines, or familiarity with school staff, teachers. Obviously, if you have experience with the school through siblings or family members, if that's your top choice school, you should rank it as number one, even if you may not be in the top priority, or your child may not be in the top priority groups for admission, right? Because this is really your opportunity to express your preference. Consider applying to your zone school as one of those schools where you know you have a really top choice or likely option of being admitted, and consider transportation or other factors that will accommodate how convenient this school is for you. For children entering kindergarten, they are not guaranteed transportation, especially for children with disabilities, who many for preschool are guaranteed transportation if they attend a special class or an integrated class. That's not the same for kindergarten. We cover that a little bit more in the kindergarten IEP webinar, and we'll touch on it today. But just so you know that may be a factor. So think about it in how you rank different schools. Here we are with transportation. So when are children guaranteed transportation? If it's on their IEP. If a child's IEP recommends specialized transportation, then they get door-to-door transportation from your home to the school. For children who do not have transportation recommended on their IEP, they may be eligible for transportation if the school is more than half a mile from their home and within their school district. If a bus route exists, then that child, or if a bus route exists or can be easily made, a child can be added to that bus route, then the child may be eligible for school to bus stop busing, where you would walk your child to a designated area for pickup and drop off. If there is no route, then the transportation that you may receive will be in the form of a Metro card that you or another adult can use to take your child to and from school. There are some exceptions for students in temporary housing and students in foster care who may be eligible for transportation, even if they, for example, attend a school that's outside of their school district. And in many cases, it's to make sure that they are able to remain in the school that they attended and not have that disrupted throughout the school year. If you have any questions or want more information about transportation, you can email the DOE at earlychildhoodbusing@schools.nyc.gov, can call them at 718-932-8855, or can visit the DOE's website, schools.nyc.gov/transportation to learn more. Okay, we'll pause for questions. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A on my end or in the chat. So feel free to enter any questions now. Otherwise, I think we'll proceed. after you've applied, right? So everyone here is going to apply by the January 20th deadline. Something that I haven't mentioned, but that is key to share, is that all applications received by the deadline are treated the same. As you saw in the admissions priority, there's no first come, first serve priority group. There's not a bump up for families who applied in December or 2 weeks before the deadline. All applications received by January 20th will be treated the same. Everyone who applies by the deadline should receive an offer in the spring. We recommend that once you receive that offer, you accept the offer and you register your child for that school. What that does is it reserves the seat for your child. It signals to the DOE that I will be enrolling my child in the school in September. What it doesn't do is it doesn't affect your child's position on a wait list. So your child will automatically be put on the wait list for any school that you ranked higher than the school that made you an offer. So if you applied to 12 schools and you received an offer to the school that you ranked number 4, maybe number 4 was your zone school, you're automatically put on the wait list for the schools you ranked number 3, 2, and 1. Accepting and registering does not remove your child from that wait list. We wish you luck in getting a seat from the wait list. It is possible. There are many reasons why seats may open up, including families who moved and that school is no longer an option for them, families who opted to place their child in a private school, families of children with disabilities who their child couldn't be appropriately served in that school and maybe needed something more supportive, right? There could be a lot of reasons why there is a movement within the wait list, so remain hopeful. You can still hear back from wait lists. You know, we've heard of some families hearing back still in September. At that point, obviously, it's up to you if you've already had your child started a school, whether you want to pull them out. So just things to keep in mind. You please note or at least the DOE says a request that you not contact schools directly, that they don't have the information of where you are on a wait list. So please wait to hear from the school whether they will be able to make your child an offer. If the school that made you an offer, the school where you registered, is going to create some type of hardship for your family, and you're not getting an offer from a wait list, or you've waited and you haven't gotten an offer from a wait list, you can request a medical and reasonable accommodation transfer. Again, this is if the placement would create a hardship or based on medical needs would be a difficult placement for your child. You can request the transfer at a family welcome center. The transfer doesn't necessarily guarantee you a right to attend any particular school, but should be a way to alleviate whatever that hardship is. So for example, if the hardship is caused by having siblings that attend schools very far away, or based on your work schedule or child's care schedule, you can't coordinate the busing and drop off or any other needs, you can contact a family welcome center to request a transfer. What they may do is try, if your children are in schools that are far apart, is to find a school that's closer to the other, but not necessarily a placement in that same school or, the school across the street. Depending on, it will really come down to seat availability and how they're able to accommodate that. Now, if the issue though is, for example, you need an accessible school, that is something that the DOE will have to accommodate or will have to accommodate a transfer for. But again, even for that, it may not be to a particular school depending on seat availability. When you accept the offer and register, these are some of the documents that you will need. One is proof of your child's age. You can do this with a birth certificate, passport, or record of baptism, among others. You will need 2 proofs of address. Accepted documents include leases, a deed, a mortgage statement, utility bill, a rent receipt, government ID with the address on it. There are other options as well that you can find in our kindergarten admissions guide that we will link to, but we're giving you here kind of the most common. You do not need to provide proof of citizenship or a social security number to register at a school. And for families of students in temporary housing, you do not need to have this documentation with you when you go to register. There's an understanding that it may be more difficult for you to have access to these documents, so that you do have a right to immediate enrollment. The school needs to register and enroll your child and give you time to come up or to find this documentation. Okay, so we've covered a lot. We're going to keep covering a lot, but want to do kind of another poll just to check in on knowledge. When you accept a kindergarten offer and pre-register your child at the school, you are A, taking your child off the wait list for other schools, B, reserving a seat for your child at the school, C, no longer eligible to apply to charter schools, or D, all of the above. Some of you are very quick with your responses. I'm going to give a few more seconds to those of you who are still thinking about it. Okay. Most of you got this right, so congratulations and thanks for listening. The correct answer is that when you pre-register your child at the school or register your child, you're reserving a seat for your child at that school. You are not taking your child off the wait list for other schools. You will remain on the wait list generally through the start of the school year in September. This process, the process of applying to kindergarten, does not have to do with the charter school admissions process. That is a separate process. So you can still apply to charter schools. You can be on the wait list for charter schools, or then register for a charter school and turn down the DOE offer if you choose. And we'll go over some of these in a moment, like now. So charter schools. For those of you unfamiliar with charter schools, they are also free public schools, but they're not run by the Department of Education. They're run by their own boards. You can find a list of charter schools or more information on charter schools at nyccharterschools.org. You can apply to schools directly or online through the Central Charter School application at nyccharterschools.org/apply. The timeline for the charter school application process is a little bit later. It's most applications aren't due until April 1st. So do recommend that right now you focus on applying to DOE public schools because that deadline is January 20th. But you can definitely begin researching schools, learning more. And sometimes many families choose to apply to charter schools depending on when they're hearing back from DOE schools. So keep that in mind, that is an additional option. For families of children with disabilities, you should know that charter schools must serve children with disabilities. A child's IEP or having an IEP or the IEP specific recommendations should not be a factor in making that admissions decision, and charter schools must serve children with disabilities. Additional information for students with disabilities is you will receive through the kindergarten admissions process, it's the same process and you'll receive the same information as all families, but children with disabilities receive an additional notification at the end of June or at the end of the school year around June 15th. And it's called a school location letter, and the DOE will print it on green paper and mail it to families. This green school location letter will list the school that will implement your child's IEP, right? It should be the school that has the program and services that were recommended at your child's IEP meeting that happens later this school year. If your child's IEP recommends a non-specialized program, right? So if your child's IEP recommends general education with related services, just sets, if it recommends an integrated co-teaching class, or it recommends a special class in a non-specialized school, the school that's listed on this green school location letter should be the same school that made you an offer through the kindergarten admissions process. What we recommend is that you call that school when you receive this green school location letter just to confirm that they actually will have the program and services that your child needs. And I think this is particularly important if your child's IEP recommends a special class in a non-specialized school. Because as I said, although the DOE says that all their public schools offer the same programs and special education services, in practice, we've seen that not all schools have that special class or don't have it for kindergarten. Now, when you call them, there may be a chance that they say, we're still looking into opening one up for kindergarten, because if there are other 10 students assigned to that school who also need that special class, it could be that the school will open that special class placement for September. If not, you can work with the school to think through, if you want your child to attend that school, to think through other accommodations. Or you may also be able to ask the Department of Education for another school placement that has what is recommended on your child's IEP. And for some families, you may also be able to get placement at a private school in a state-approved non-public school at the DOE's expense, because the school that they offered could not provide the services that your child needs. We cover this a little bit more in our kindergarten IEP webinar, as well as our Turning 5 guide in the section regarding Nickerson letters, which is about specifically attending a state-approved non-public school because the school the DOE offered cannot serve your child or meet your child's needs. Okay. We'll pause for questions. Okay. Oh, Diana's back. So are you?
No, go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say that there was a specific question that I think maybe we can answer live, just around what the difference is between Department of Education schools and charter schools. I just answered it, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that.
Go ahead. I don't see it here, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, I would just wanted to say that really the big difference is just that these schools are not run by the Department of Education, right, by the government. They're run by a board of trustees. And so they are not held necessarily to the standards that the Department of Education is held by. They're held sort of by the standards that this autonomous group creates, that is the board of trustees. So that's really the main difference. But Betty, let me know if there's anything else I missed. But that was just a question I answered that maybe the group wanted to know.
No, those are generally the differences. Just like there's differences among different DOE public schools from one to the next. Different charter schools have different goals or priorities or reputations, right? Generally, like Success Academy or Achievement First, right? They each have their own mission statement and information about them. And then within those schools, any particular location may have a different culture and practice. Really, this is your chance to look into those schools, ask questions, see if there are open houses or virtual tours where you can get more information. Generally, what some families like is that they're an alternative if the family's unhappy with their zone school, or if it's a school that's more structured, maybe with more discipline. Those are things that some families like, some dislike. Some find that wouldn't be right for their child. So it really is a matter of choice, and they're just expanding your options. I see that there are some additional questions in the Q&A. Are there disadvantages for not listing 12 schools in the application? Nope. If there are not 12 schools that you are interested in, you do not need to list 12. If there's only one school that you want to list, you can just do one school. If it's not your zone school, nobody is guaranteed entry just because they listed one. So you may not get an offer to that school. What you miss out on is offering other options that you may be of interest, because if the DOE cannot give you an offer to that school, they're required to give you a kindergarten offer, or give your child a kindergarten seat. So then they may just see where there's a seat available, and not give you an opportunity to express any additional preferences. Someone applied for an ASD program for their child. Do you have to apply to the school which has an ASD program right now in this kindergarten application process, or wait to have the ASD program evaluate a child? The process for that, as you know, so for those of you who are not familiar, the DOE has some special programs that are available in some, but not all specialized school. ASD Nest and ASD Horizon are some of those for children with autism. If you apply to one of those specialized programs, it's not through the kindergarten admissions process, it's a separate process. Your child will be evaluated by that program and potentially given an offer to that program. If you're accepted into the program, they work to find a school in your area that has the ASD program. So you do not have to list ASD or schools that have ASD programs in your application. Applying to a school that has an ASD program is not necessarily a way in through the back door to get into the Nest or Horizon program. Your child would be considered for admissions to the school generally, remembering that the IEP is not one of those factors for the admissions priority. Okay, if a child temporarily moves to a relative's home due to a family emergency, apart from their regular home, can the school bus go to the temporary home for the time being and not lose the school assigned? So this question has a lot of different factors. Generally, if the child's already, if your child's attending the school, is a kindergarten student already attending the school and receiving busing or eligible for busing, you may be able to get an alternative drop-off location if needed to accommodate the child's temporary living arrangement. If, on the other hand, a family, for example, if you apply to schools now, the family moves and now is living in an area that's not within a school zone or a school district that they had applied to, even if they get an offer, they may lose eligibility for that seat because they're no longer within the zone or the district, or however whatever their priority group was that made them an offer. Hopefully I've explained that in a way that makes sense. We do cover this a bit in our kindergarten admissions guide. So since there are a lot of factors, hopefully I've explained it. If not, we can come back near the end of the presentation because this is a very specific question that may not be as relevant to everyone here. What's the difference between a 12-student class in a community school and District 75? We cover that in our kindergarten IEP webinar. Generally, it's related to the extent of a child's needs, either academically or behaviorally. But because that is specific to students with disabilities and developing the IEP, would recommend that you attend that webinar or review the Turning 5 guide that goes into that in more detail. Families have the right to language access, including translation and interpretation into the language that their primary language or the language they're most comfortable in. The DOE, for the most part, does, on their website and through any printed materials, they generally do provide translation into Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, French, Haitian, Creole, Korean, Russian, Spanish, and Urdu. That said, all families have a right to translation and interpretation, even if it's not one of these most common languages, right? Translation refers to written documents and interpretation refers to spoken word. So have right to translation of special education records, of admissions offers, of other printed records, and interpretation at meetings, including special education meetings and IEP meetings. If you have been denied access to translation or interpretation, you can call the DOE complaint line at 718-935-2013 or email the DOE at hello@schools.nyc.gov. We're on the tail end here. I know that you're anxiously awaiting the end. So don't worry, we are wrapping up. Just to end with some key resources, wanted to have them in a handy place for you. We have a kindergarten admissions guide that goes over everything we've covered here today, including in much more detail. It is all specific to children born in 2018 who are applying to kindergarten in September of 2023. The DOE also has resources, as we've said. The online directory and application is at myschools.nyc. There is an admissions guide. It covers all grades, so it doesn't have specific information or deadline, but it is an additional resource that you can have, as well as the DOE website where you can find additional information on admissions priorities and some videos from their enrollment office explaining the admissions process that we've covered here today. If you'd like to speak to someone for additional support, you can contact a Family Welcome Center, again, located throughout the city. Recommend that you email to schedule an appointment or reach out before going in person. This is a link to where you can find their contact information. You can contact the DOE Office of Student Enrollment by email or by phone. And of course, us, Advocates for Children, we have our helpline at 866-427-6033. All families can call. We can answer your kindergarten questions. Available Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. If you don't get through, please leave a voicemail. We try to get back to everyone within 2 days. For families of children with disabilities, have some additional resources, including our Turning 5 guide. That's about creating the kindergarten IEP, what to expect from the process, what programs are available, what services are available, how the process is different from preschool, and just generally what happens this year, what you'll be receiving in the mail. It's pretty comprehensive. The DOE has their own website on the transition to kindergarten and development of the IEP, as well as an orientation guide. You can find copies of these orientation guides at Family Welcome Centers or CPSC offices, Committee of Preschool Special Education offices. And you can email the DOE to request a PDF of the guide sent to you as well. The DOE has a District 75 website and specialized programs. I referenced ASC, NESS, and Horizon. This is where you can find more about those programs. And if you would like to attend another webinar on developing the kindergarten IEP, as I said, AFC will be conducting those as well. The DOE has them on developing the kindergarten IEP and the application as a joint webinar. There are still some dates in January 24th and 26th. As you can see, unfortunately, that is after the end of the application period, but you can find some pre-recorded sessions on the DOE website following this link. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. Sorry that we went a little bit over, and thank you for staying with us. I'm going to launch a survey to get your feedback on how this presentation went, and we'll double check the Q&A to answer any outstanding questions while you all do that. Okay, so it looks like Diana is answering one. The other question says, there's a question referring back to an earlier question.
I think this is the one about the transportation, right, Elif?
The child temporarily moving, as I'll just repeat, the child may be eligible to receive an alternative drop-off location or potentially pickup and drop-off location. You would have to contact the Office of Pupil Transportation, or OPT, or send an email to the ECE busing inbox that we gave earlier in this presentation to see if that can be set up. It will be affected by a variety of factors, including whether this temporary location is still within the school's district, within the zone, whether there's a possible bus route. If it is for a child with a disability who has busing recommended on their IEP, then that child has a right to transportation regardless of where they live. But otherwise, if it is a child who's receiving transportation based on that criteria, right, where the child lives more than half a mile from the school, but within the school district, then their busing will be affected if they are temporarily in another home. And if they're temporarily in another home because of, and in temporary housing, again, that child has additional rights. The reason, I can't go too much into detail with you, especially on a webinar, this is a really unique and specific situation you're asking about. So hopefully you have a better understanding of your options or what may happen now. But if not, really recommend that you call our helpline because this is a really unique circumstance. Okay, again, giving another opportunity. I know we are at time, but if anyone else has any additional questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A. We'll remain here for another couple of minutes, or to leave a question or comment in the chat. You're welcome to. All right, well, thank you all for participating. Wish you the best of luck in applying to kindergarten and in the kindergarten IEP process. If you'll be participating in that as well, you should know that we are here to support you if you need it. But we'll, send positive vibes that you get into one of your top choice schools. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, everyone.